Good Saturday morning, everyone. Today on Perspectives, we're talking about the rights of crime victims. Now, too often the focus of a crime is put on the suspect, but it's the victims who really need someone to guide them through the judicial process. For some, the physical and emotional scars will stay with them a lifetime. Now, whether they personally were the victim of a crime or a loved one was, Mobile County District Attorney Ashley Rich wants them to know that they have rights and there is help available to any crime victim. National Crime Victims' Rights Week begins in just a few days. It's actually April 24th through the 30th. It's a week set aside for law enforcement officials, advocacy groups, and partner agencies to honor crime victims. This year's theme is Rights, Access, and Equity for All Victims. The theme underscores the importance of helping crime survivors find their justice by enforcing victims' rights, expanding access to services, and ensuring equity and inclusion for all. Now, many victims don't know that they actually have these rights and resources available, no matter the crime committed against them. In fact, there is a Crime Victims Bill of Rights, and that we'll learn more about a little later in the program this morning. The Mobile County District Attorney's Office will hold a resource fair and victims vigil this Thursday, April 28th. It's a chance for all crime victims and their families to gather together to share their challenges. There will be resources available from many local agencies. It's also a time to offer support for anyone who has lost a loved one to a violent crime. Now, if you have lost a loved one due to violence, you can bring their picture with you as well to be placed on a remembrance board. Joining us this morning to talk about the importance of crime victims' rights and more about the awareness events happening this upcoming week is Mobile County District Attorney Ashley Rich. Perspectives continues after this quick break. A very special guest this morning, District Attorney Ashley Rich, Mobile County. And of course, we're talking, DA Rich, about National Crime Victims Week. I guess let's go back a little bit before this kicked off, in 1981. Why was there was a need for something like this?
You know, when someone is a victim of a crime, it often seems like the victim takes a back seat to the criminal proceedings because the defendant is, of course, charged and on trial. And so we saw a need to recognize crime victims, and we passed in the state of Alabama the Alabama Crime Victims Bill of Rights. So they actually have a Bill of Rights of things that they are entitled to receive when they are a victim of crime. Not financially, but they are entitled to go to court. They're entitled to receive notifications of all of the court hearings and the court dates. And it's a great thing that we started doing in the 80s and we continue to do today, because we want to recognize that crime victims have rights in the justice system, and they have a right to be there. They have a right to be present at all of the proceedings and to be at the trial. And so we also, you know, it's real interesting. A lot of people in the community still don't know that we have victim service officers that work through the justice system and the whole entire process with our crime victims. So it's just important to bring awareness in this week for National Crime Victims' Rights Week of what we do at the District Attorney's Office, how we help victims. I know that I have a victim's family member. Many of the public probably remembers the Kaiser Marie case, where Kaiser was a young man who was an engineer at Chevron, and he was gunned down in his home in Midtown. And his father and mother lived in Birmingham, and they came down, and after we were successful in prosecuting the people that killed him, and they are in jail still to this day, he came down and he said, you know, Ms. Rich, keep doing what you're doing, because you provided a service for us and for our family that we could not provide for ourselves. And it was a real motivator for me, and I've never forgotten that. And I always try to make sure everyone in my office understands we're doing something for victims of crime that they can't do for themselves, and we're helping them in a very vulnerable time in their lives. Whether it's a victim that had their car broken into, and they're explaining to their kids around the dinner table, you know, you're safe, it's okay, you know, those kinds of conversations that have to happen when you become a victim of any type of crime.
There's a lot goes on in our mental psyche when we feel like we've been violated, invaded, and especially in a case that you mentioned, I remember that one very vividly from when it happened, and knew some people that knew of him, the young engineer. Now, this new theme for 2022 is rights, access, equity for all victims. And that sounds like what you're getting to the point there, making sure that the victim doesn't feel deserted, alone, and now wondering what's going to happen next.
Right, and so throughout the process, we have court orientation to explain the court process to our victims of crime, and both in district court and circuit court, and so they can come and learn about the process, and our victim services officers reach out to them every step of the way, trying to make sure they understand where the case is in the court process, because you know it takes a long time. Unfortunately, justice is very slow, and so we want to make sure that even though victims may have not heard from us for a couple of months, that doesn't mean their case is not still active and moving through the process.
And speaking of that, now the time factor has gotten just really slowed down due to COVID and how that affected the court system.
Before COVID, we told victims it would be anywhere from 18 months to 2 years before their case would be concluded, and now after COVID, we're saying 3 to 4 years.
My goodness, that's a major change there. Do you expect for things to speed up once we're completely back in the courts together, or have we gotten back in now?
We're not completely back
okay.
to schedule, but I'm hopeful that if the judges continue to open up their dockets and to schedule more cases throughout their trial weeks, that we will hopefully try to reduce this backlog.
Simple question, and seems like it might be a simple answer, but we know how in the system. Who is described as a victim? How do you describe a person who is the victim?
Anyone is a victim that has had a criminal act committed against them. So it would be someone, like I said, whose car's broken into when they're sleeping, at night, and their car's broken into. It would be anybody who's had a crime that's been committed against them. Burglary of their home, burglary of their outbuildings, theft of property, identity theft. I could just go on and on. Anybody who has been a victim of any type of criminal act.
And of course,
and let me just say this too. It's real important that maybe we didn't catch the perpetrator yet, and they are a victim, but we haven't caught the perpetrator. They still have victim rights, and they have the right to be notified by the detectives about what is going on with their case and where they are in the investigative process. So it doesn't just start with the district attorney's office when the defendant is arrested. They have rights to be informed of what's going on with the investigation of their case by law enforcement.
That's a good point, because a lot of people, of course, we don't know all of the ins and outs of the system as far as what is available, and I think you mentioned earlier, a lot of times that's not something that we hear about a lot as far as what the victim is entitled to. And when you talked about some of those, I know that they are what you consider basic rights of victims of crime, such as to be informed of proceedings and the events.
And to be present at the proceedings, and to be present at all hearings, whether it's a motion hearing or an arraignment or a bond hearing. They have a right to be present at all stages of the proceedings.
Then we talk about free from the proceedings, be free from unreasonable delay. And of course, you don't have control over that, unfortunately.
Right. I don't set the court calendar. The presiding judge sets the court calendar, so I don't have control over when the cases are actually go to trial and get concluded.
Now here's one that a lot of people are always concerned about: for privacy and protection from intimidation and harassment.
Well, we do everything in our power to make sure that the defendant does not have the personal information of the victim, so that they can't in any way reach out to the victim. Eric, bringing up a negative point, but it happens all the time. One of the biggest problems we're having in our prison system in the state of Alabama is access to cell phones, illegal access to cell phones. They're not allowed to have cell phones while they're in prison. And then they reach out and try to contact victims through social media. It's horrible, and every time that happens, the victim will need to call us, and then we will have a shakedown done of their cell. And 9 times out of 10, we find the illegal cell phone, and so that's an important thing that we do. And that's another example of not only do we help the victims all the way through the court process. Once the defendant goes to jail or prison, we help them through that process, and we also go up. And one of the things I'm so proud about in my tenure as the district attorney is we have been very, very successful in going going to the parole board and successfully fighting early release of criminals back into Mobile County. I started that program when I became the DA, and it's been a very successful program. When someone from Mobile drives all the way up to Birmingham 3 days a week to protect our victims and to make sure our voice is heard, that we do not want this defendant released early on parole.
So this is held in Birmingham. So
it's held in Montgomery.
Oh, in Montgomery. Okay, so even there, that's a ride.
Absolutely, they're getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to be there at an 8 o'clock docket, and they are doing a great job. And I'm very proud that we are providing that service to victims of crime, because a lot of victims, once the case has been concluded in the courtroom, they don't want to go up to the parole board. It's just too hurtful. It just brings up the crime again and the circumstances. And so we go and we're their representative at the parole board for them if they do not feel like they have the ability to do it.
Because it's always a concern, that person getting out too soon, as relates to what you at least expect for them to provide that full time of what they've been sentenced to.
Right.
Now, the Crime Victims' Rights Act of 2004, some of the things that you've been talking about, do you feel that with the week and the observation of what's been taking place through the district attorney's office over the years, you all have met those acts?
You know, we do. We try very, very diligently to make sure that we always protect the victim's rights. And we ask the public, if you are a victim of crime, even though you may have not heard something about your case, please call us, because oftentimes, you know, you get a new cell phone number, you move, your address changes, and we're going off the information that the law enforcement agency provides us. Right. So sometimes we're unable to communicate with crime victims. But if you have been a victim of crime and we have not reached out to you, please reach out to our office, and we will make sure that we have good information about how to contact you in the future, and we will do that.
Let's pause on that, and we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll talk more about the National Crime Victims' Right, and of course the week taking place here in just a few days. So we'll tell you more coming up with our District Attorney, Ashley Rich. We're talking about National Crime Victims' Rights Week, and that's coming up here in just a few days. Our very special guest this morning, District Attorney Ashley Rich. And we want to talk about some of the things that happened that night of the night out that you have, with the recognition of the families as well as resources available too.
Right. On Thursday, April 28th at 6 p.m. at Cooper Riverside Park, we have a crime victims vigil and resource fair. And so what we do is we have all of our local partnering agencies, Penelope House, the Drug Education Council, Alta Point, Lifeline's Family Counseling Center, and I could go on and on and on, but we have tremendous partners that come out, and they come together for crime victims and provide resources for them. An example, Eric, might be if, you know, someone had a young child that was absolutely traumatized by the crime that was committed against the family. Then we could hook them up with family counseling so that they could all go together and work through the issues of being a crime victim together as a family. The other thing is you know, a lot of people don't have the means right now. The economy is so bad, and gas has gone up so high, and people, you know, are on a stretching their money as far as they can. If someone comes in and breaks down their door to burglarize their house and they don't have the money to fix their door, then we can apply to the Alabama Crime Victims Compensation Fund for them on their behalf to try and get money reimbursed to them to have to, you know, do the repairs to their home or to their car, you know, whatever has caused them to be affected by crime. And so we hook them up, and we make sure that our partners are there to help them, and they learn and understand the resources that are available to them. But the best part about the vigil is for particularly homicide victims, where they come together and they bring a photo of their loved one to memorialize their loved one, and we have a victim board that we put it on, and we talk about their loved ones and what it means to be a victim's family member, and they get to see other victims' family members whose cases may have been concluded, but they're still coming back to the vigil to memorialize their loved one. And it's just a really special evening. It's a bonding moment between families that can help each other who've been through the same or similar circumstances as a crime victim. And it's a lovely evening. And then to conclude the evening, we we give each of our victims' family members a butterfly to release into the wild, and it's just a very, very special event for them to memorialize their loved one.
It really sounds like, when you think about that whole support aspect of this, that is so critical at this time for people.
People who haven't been a victim of crime, the average person in the community has no idea what we do at the district attorney's office until they become a victim of crime. And then when they become a victim of crime, they have a heightened awareness of what exactly we do at our office. And we're honored to be able to represent them and be their lawyer when they are a victim of crime. And those people, as they go through the criminal justice system, learn so much. And although we try to impart our knowledge on the new victims, those older victims who've been through the justice system, to come back and share their knowledge of what happened and what the district attorney's office did for them is just the best public relations we could ever have. And we have victims' families that have been coming back to the vigil for 10 and 15 and 20 years. I've been a prosecutor for 26 years, and I have a family that's been coming for 20 years to the vigil.
That speaks volumes of what you're providing out there. Give us an idea of course, no names or things of that type, but some of those families that you've really seen some incredible results for them due to the resources that you're providing.
Just to have somebody sit next to you and perhaps put their arm around you or pat you on the shoulder and just say, everything is going to be different, but it's going to be okay. Your life has changed forever in an instant if you have a loved one that's been killed, and your life will never ever be the same, and no one's there telling them that their life will ever be the same. Everyone is there telling them that you have this whole village that's trying to help you get through this trying time that you are facing going through the justice system, because it is very trying. I had another victim, wonderful woman, and she said to us later, I asked her to come and speak to the office and give them a motivational speech, and she told the staff, all of the staff, the ADAs and the trial coordinators and everyone, she said, it didn't matter if you were my prosecutor that was working on my case or you were my trial coordinator assigned to the case. As long as I saw someone in the hall that was a member of the DA's office, I felt safe, I felt protected, I didn't feel alone. And that's really what the vigil stands for. So we don't want any victim of crime or any victim's family members of crime to feel alone through this process. We want to make sure they understand that there's just a tremendous amount of people in this community that want to help them.
That speaks volumes there when you talk about what you do, and then the case that you mentioned where you mentioned that a family is still coming back for all those years. What do they lend to the vigil for the people who are coming maybe for the first time or still waiting for some
just to know
resolution?
That there will be closure at some point, and that the people that helped them are going to be some of the same people that help the victim they're talking to that's currently going through the justice system, and to make sure they understand that there's just a lot of people in this community who've gone through a very similar circumstance by losing a loved one to an act of violent crime, and it's almost like a brotherhood or a sisterhood, and that there's a lot of people that are there to help them.
So once again, that's coming up. And the vigil will be taking place at Cooper's Riverside Park. Tell us again.
Cooper Riverside Park on Thursday, April 28th at 6 p.m. It usually lasts about an hour, hour and a half, but of course the resource agencies will be there for an hour and a half to 2 hours. And we just invite anyone. It doesn't have to be someone who is a victim's family member of a violent crime. It can be anyone that's been a victim of crime that would like to come and be united with others in this very special event.
And there are several agencies that will be there also with you in support.
Absolutely. We'll probably have at least 20 agencies that will be there, and we're just really, really proud that they can come and share their information with others on how they can help crime victims.
And I love that example you gave about, say, in a family where they've been affected by crime, and the child may need some additional support because it's affecting them differently.
Oh, absolutely. I had a person come to me and say, my vehicle was broken into, and he had small children, and he didn't realize that he needed to have a conversation with his children. He was taking care of, getting the window of the car fixed, getting his wallet replaced, getting all the things that had been stolen out of his vehicle replaced, and he didn't really realize that, hey, this young kid and his family had just kind of gone through that too, and is wondering, is the bad guy that did that to my daddy's car going to come back, kind of thing. And so he realized that he needed help in learning how to talk to his kids and discussing, what happened and then what will happen to the defendant and when they go through the justice system. And so oftentimes we don't realize that we may be the actual victim, but there are other victims that are consequence of what happened.
And as you were saying, this is the first time for many people these things happening, and so we don't know how we're going to respond until we become victim of a crime like that.
That's right.
District Attorney Ashley Rich, we thank you so much for joining us today to share that, and of course for making sure this happens here in our local community.
Thank you for having me. I just appreciate your support.
And of course, that takes place this week coming up. We hope that if you are a victim, you'll see the benefit of making sure that you are part of the vigil at Cooper's Riverside Park. And again, we remind you the Crime Victims Resource Fair and Vigil this Thursday at 6 p.m. at Cooper Riverside Park. It is for any victim of a crime, and for those that are victims of violent crimes, there's that special vigil for those who have lost a loved one to violence. Now you can bring your picture to the vigil of that loved one to be placed on a remembrance board. It's a chance for folks to share their stories and honor their loved one. Up next on Perspectives, how safe would our neighborhoods be and the city be without our firefighters? May 4th, by the way, is International Firefighters Day, a day to recognize the brave men and women focusing on the incredible job that they do and to recognize their sacrifices, risking their lives for others. It's also a day to honor the lives of firefighters that were lost while on duty. We'll talk with 2 officers from Mobile Fire and Rescue about the men and women who serve and why they serve. We'll also prepare you for the upcoming smoke alarm blitz that's coming up in the month of May. Well, please join us here next Saturday morning at 9 a.m. for Perspectives as we discuss those important issues and seek solutions. Now, if you have any idea of topics that you'd like for us to address, just drop that information to us here at fox10tv.com. I'm Eric Reynolds. Have a great week ahead.
Thanks for watching Fox 10 News. Watch us live wherever you are, on our mobile, our streaming news app, and you can also watch us on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV.